Nelly stood by the roadside, waiting for her mechanic. Her car had broken down, and she was visibly frustrated. Maurice approached her and asked what the issue was. She explained she was waiting for help and mentioned that she was thirsty. Maurice offered to bring her water, but jokingly said he would charge her for the service. He quickly crossed the street, brought her a bottle of water, and then asked for payment. Nelly was surprised he would charge her just for that, but Maurice told her it was part of his hustle. Out of sympathy, Nelly paid him. Later that day, Maurice returned home and found his friend Ken asleep. He woke him up and, with frustration, told him that one football team had cost him a multi-bet worth $24 million. He lamented how close he had come to changing his life, buying cars, apartments, and finally escaping poverty. Ken shared his own frustration, saying he had gone out looking for work and couldn't even find a single construction site hiring. He then advised Maurice to go get more goods on credit from a local shop, noting that the shopkeeper had a crush on him and might overlook their unpaid balance. Some days later, Nelly visited the construction site where Maurice was working. She told him that she admired his hustle and offered him a job at her house. Maurice accepted immediately, saying he was willing to clean, wash cars, cook, anything that needed to be done. When Nelly brought him to her home, her sisters Yvonne and Cassia immediately reacted to his presence. They complained about his appearance and body odor, with Yvonne saying he looked like he came from the garbage and Cassia accusing him of being a thief. Nelly defended him and introduced him as their new house help, but the sisters walked away mocking him. Later that evening, Maurice told Ken what had happened. He shared how Yvonne and Cassia had insulted him and looked down on him because of his background. Ken encouraged him to quit, but Maurice said they needed the money. He had no other option. Back at work, Maurice continued doing his chores. Nelly visited him again and asked him not to call her Madam, but simply Nelly. Maurice told her he was preparing fried rice and promised it would be the best she had ever tasted. During the meal, Maurice served the food and poured drinks. Unfortunately, the juice spilled on Cassia. In anger, she slapped him and insulted him, saying his skincare routine could support his entire family. She then ordered him to get on his knees and lick the juice off the floor. Nelly tried to defend him, insisting it was an accident, but Maurice was told to leave. Yvonne and Cassia questioned why Nelly kept taking his side. Not long after, Yvonne handed Maurice her clothes and told him to wash and iron them. When he asked her to be polite, she snapped at him, reminding him of his place in the house. She called him names, labeling him a lowlife and a useless servant, and told him to quit if he couldn't handle it. Maurice went home again and explained everything to Ken. He was upset about being disrespected simply for asking to be treated with dignity. He also recounted how Cassia had made him get on his knees. Ken said that if it were him, he would never tolerate such disrespect. The next morning, Maurice woke up late and realized he had missed 7 calls from Yvonne. He blamed Ken for not waking him up on time. He was supposed to take Yvonne to work. When he finally arrived, Yvonne refused to listen to any excuses. She simply said she would deal with him later and left in a hurry. Back at the house, Cassia looked around for Maurice and asked who would make her breakfast. Nelly told her that Maurice had taken Yvonne to work and that if she couldn't cook, she should just order food online. Later, Nelly found Maurice mopping the floors. She told him he was hardworking and advised him to take breaks once in a while. Cassia called Maurice and handed him a pile of laundry, this time including her undergarments. Maurice hesitated. When he saw that the pile included her panties and bras, he firmly told her he couldn't wash them. It went against his morals. But Cassia wasn't having it. She gave him an ultimatum. Either he washed them or he lost his job. Maurice was torn. He felt humiliated and angry, but with no other options and bills to pay, he reluctantly took the laundry. His pride was wounded, but he couldn't afford to walk away. Later that day, Nelly found Maurice outside washing the car. She handed him a small gift, saying it was her way of appreciating his hard work. She called him a lifesaver. But Maurice, still stung by her sister's behavior, told her that they didn't see him that way. They treated him like a joke, constantly mocking him and calling him names. Nelly encouraged him to ignore them and focus on himself. She reminded him that his worth wasn't determined by their opinions. That evening, when Yvonne returned home from work, she ordered Maurice to massage her legs. When he tried to sit on the couch beside her, she immediately stopped him and told him to sit on the floor. As he massaged her, Yvonne slapped him repeatedly, insulting him while he stayed silent, swallowing his anger. Cassia returned from a wild party. She paid the Uber driver less than what was owed. When he protested, saying the distance required the full fare, she exploded. Claiming he was overcharging, she began to fight him. Maurice ran out to break up the fight, pulling Cassia away. But instead of being thankful, Cassia turned her rage on him, biting his arm and shouting at him for interfering. Back home, Ken carefully applied ointment to Maurice's wounded arm. Maurice explained everything that had happened, including how Yvonne had slapped him while demanding a massage. Ken was appalled. He couldn't understand why Maurice was still subjecting himself to that kind of treatment. He urged Maurice to quit and go back to their old street hustle. But Maurice refused. He told Ken that, unlike the streets, this job at least guaranteed some income. The hustle was always uncertain. Sometimes you ate, sometimes you didn't. The next day, Maurice returned to work. He found Yvonne in the living room, angrily yelling on a call with her employees. She complained that their project had been badly executed and warned them they had less than 24 hours to fix it before the investors' review. Maurice offered to help, but Yvonne mocked him. "You? What would a servant boy like you know about project design?" Maurice calmly told her that he had studied computer science and read product management. She didn't believe him until he took her laptop and began adjusting the presentation. Moments later, the interface was clean, smooth, and professional. Yvonne was stunned. She stared at him in silence and returned to cleaning. Later that evening, Nelly was out shopping when she saw Maurice walking home after a long day of work. She stopped him, handed him another small gift, and told him that she truly appreciated his dedication. She reminded him that he was more than just a worker. He was her friend. When Maurice returned home, Ken was shocked by the new gift. "Bro, Nelly's in love with you," Ken said. But Maurice disagreed. He told Ken that Nelly was just kind-hearted and being friendly. He didn't believe she could ever fall for someone like him, a low-class man with nothing. Nelly was from a different world. The next day, Yvonne called Maurice over and thanked him again for helping with her presentation. She told him the investors had been impressed and they secured the contract. Maurice simply smiled, saying he was just glad to help. Yvonne said she was going to freshen up, then asked him to assist her with another project afterward. Meanwhile, Nelly was alone in her room. As she thought about Maurice, her mind drifted. She imagined him walking in, moving closer, and kissing her. But it was all in her head. She shook the thought away, but quietly promised herself that she would make Maurice fall in love with her, no matter what. Back in the study, Maurice continued helping Yvonne with the next project. They worked for hours until Yvonne, exhausted, fell asleep on the couch. Maurice kept going, finishing the entire project alone. When Yvonne woke up hours later, Maurice was gone. But the laptop screen displayed a flawless final draft. She stared in disbelief. The work was not only complete, it was perfect. The next morning, Cassia caught Nelly carefully pairing designer men's clothes. Teasing her, she asked if Nelly had a secret boyfriend. Nelly shrugged it off, saying it was just a gift. Cassia asked whether the guy came from a wealthy family, but Nelly ignored her and told her to leave. Later, Yvonne approached Maurice and thanked him again. This time, she invited him out for coffee. Over coffee, Yvonne asked Maurice why he wasn't employed, despite his obvious skills. Maurice told her he had been applying for jobs for 3 years, with no luck. He said he didn't have the right connections, and because of nepotism, he had been overlooked. Eventually, he gave up.
Yvonne told him to bring his CV the next morning. Maurice was stunned and deeply grateful for the opportunity. That night, Maurice returned home and shared the news with Ken. The two celebrated together, thanking God for finally opening a door that had been closed for far too long. Maurice informed Nelly that he was quitting his job at her house. He explained that he had been offered a better position, thanks to Yvonne. Nelly was shocked. She reminded him that she was the one who brought him into the house and said Yvonne had no right to give him a job at the company without consulting her. Maurice acknowledged everything Nelly had done for him but told her he had bigger dreams. He didn't want to remain an errand boy forever. Nelly said she was happy for him but admitted she was angry that Yvonne hadn't told her first. Maurice thanked her sincerely, then left. Nelly paced in frustration, waiting for Yvonne to arrive. When she did, Nelly confronted her for hiring Maurice without consulting her. She demanded that Yvonne terminate his contract. Yvonne refused, saying Maurice was talented and a valuable asset to the company. When Kasia tried to mock Maurice by calling him an errand boy, both sisters snapped at her, telling her to stop disrespecting him. At the office, Yvonne officially welcomed Maurice to the company. She handed him keys to a new house and a car. Maurice was overwhelmed with gratitude and promised not to disappoint her. Maurice and Ken visited the new house and were amazed by its beauty. They celebrated the breakthrough, finally leaving their old life behind. Later, Nelly and Kasia visited the company. Yvonne was surprised by their presence and asked why they were there. Nelly reminded her that they were co-owners and said she came to check on operations. Maurice walked in and handed Yvonne some documents. Kasia insulted him again, calling him an errand boy and saying, "Once a pig, always a pig." Yvonne defended him, warning Kasia to stop insulting her staff. Maurice quietly walked away and told Nelly it was nice seeing her again. Afterward, Yvonne apologized to Maurice for Kasia's behavior. Maurice said he was used to it. Yvonne then confessed that she had developed feelings for him. Maurice thanked her but explained that he didn't feel the same way. Yvonne accepted his response and didn't press further. That evening, Maurice told Ken what had happened. Ken encouraged him to accept Yvonne's love, saying she was rich and could open more doors for him. But Maurice said he wanted to maintain professionalism and didn't want to complicate their working relationship. Over the weekend, Nelly visited Maurice. She said she missed him, especially having him around the house and cooking for her. She confessed that she had fallen in love with him from the first day and that hiring him was her way of staying close. Maurice thanked her but told her he didn't share those feelings. He said he valued her friendship but didn't love her. Nelly asked him to think about it. Nelly started coming to the office more frequently. She often admired Maurice from afar, but he stayed focused on his work. Yvonne continued to smile at him, and the tension between the sisters grew. At home, Maurice told Ken that he had fallen in love with Yvonne. He said that after working closely with her, he saw how kind, strong, and genuine she was. Ken warned him to be careful not to cause a rift between the sisters. Maurice and Yvonne eventually started dating. They left the office together, holding hands and smiling. At one point, they kissed in public unaware that Nelly was watching them from a distance. That evening, Nelly confronted Yvonne at home. She accused her of stealing Maurice from her and warned her to stay away from him. Yvonne told her that Maurice never loved her and that they were in love. Nelly warned that if she didn't back off, she would do something she would regret. The next day, Nelly visited Maurice and brought him a gift. Maurice told her to stop bringing gifts and confessed that he was in love with Yvonne. Nelly said she brought the gifts because she genuinely cared and reminded him that she was the first to see his potential. Maurice gently repeated that his heart belonged to Yvonne. Later, Maurice told Yvonne that Nelly had come to see him. Yvonne revealed that she and her sister had been fighting over him. Maurice said it was never his intention to come between them and asked what he could do to stop it. Yvonne told him not to worry, saying the sisters had been through worse and would eventually sort it out. Back at home, Nelly sat in the living room, deep in thought. She whispered to herself a quiet vow. She would win Maurice no matter the cost. Nelly visited Maurice, hoping to change his mind. She spoke softly, trying to seduce him, urging him to leave Yvonne and be with her instead. But Maurice stood firm. He told her he had fallen deeply in love with Yvonne and couldn't betray her. As he spoke, Nelly leaned in and kissed him. Maurice pulled away, stunned. Then he saw Yvonne standing nearby watching in silence. Before he could explain, she turned and walked away. He ran after her, calling her name, trying to explain that it wasn't what it looked like. But Yvonne didn't stop. Nelly, left behind, smiled to herself, pleased with the chaos she had created. Maurice tried calling Yvonne repeatedly that evening, but she ignored every call. Ken advised him to give her space, then talk to her the next day when emotions had settled. The following morning, Maurice walked into Yvonne's office, hoping to make things right. He explained that Nelly had forced the kiss, that there was nothing between them. But Yvonne had already shut down emotionally. She referred to him coldly by his full name and told him that if it wasn't work-related, he should leave her office. A week passed. Yvonne didn't come to the office, didn't call, didn't text. Maurice grew worried. He told Ken he missed her deeply and feared something might have happened. Ken encouraged him to show her how much she meant to him. Taking the advice, Maurice went to her house. Kasia answered the door. He told her he came to check on Yvonne. Kasia said Yvonne didn't want to see him. She then asked why both of her sisters were fighting over him, but Maurice said nothing. He turned around and quietly left. Days later, Yvonne returned to the office. On her desk was a single flower and a handwritten note. Maurice walked in behind her and said he missed her. He suggested they go out together. They did. After the date, they returned to Yvonne's house only to find Nelly waiting. She rushed at Yvonne, shouting that she had stolen her man. Maurice stepped in and told Nelly firmly that he was never hers and never would be. That angered Nelly even more. She shouted that she was the one who lifted him out of the ghetto, cleaned him up, and gave him a chance. And now, he dared to speak to her like that. She warned him that he would always be a broke boy and that Yvonne would leave him eventually. That night, Yvonne began packing her things. She had stayed up, reflecting on everything. She told Kasia she couldn't take the fighting anymore. Kasia tried to mediate between her sisters, but neither was willing to compromise. Later, Maurice and Ken were playing a game when there was a knock on the door. It was Yvonne. She had come to stay. She said the constant conflict with Nelly had worn her down, and she needed peace. Maurice and Ken welcomed her and told her to feel at home. Meanwhile, Nelly sat in her room, overwhelmed by regret. She realized that pushing Yvonne out had backfired and now her sister was living with the man she still loved. Her obsession grew. And then, quietly, she muttered that if she couldn't have Maurice, no one would. Weeks later, Maurice and Yvonne were laughing and playing outside. Nelly was watching from her car. She hit the accelerator and sped toward them. Yvonne noticed it first. In one quick move, she pushed Maurice out of the way and the car hit her instead. Nelly panicked. She slammed the brakes, stared at her injured sister on the ground, and drove off in terror. Back home, Nelly broke down. She sobbed uncontrollably, telling Kasia that she had killed her own sister. Kasia was horrified and demanded to know what had happened. Nelly admitted that she meant to hit Maurice, not Yvonne. Maurice, on the other hand, was devastated. He couldn't believe Nelly would go as far as trying to take his life. His heartbreak turned to rage. Later that evening, Kasia returned with news. Yvonne had survived. She suffered minor injuries and a broken arm, but she was alive. Kasia told Nelly she owed them both an apology. The next day, with tears in her eyes, she apologized. She admitted that seeing Maurice with Yvonne had hurt deeply and clouded her judgment. She said she had been jealous, broken, and ashamed of what she had become. Maurice was there. He told Nelly that there had never been anything between them, just gratitude and respect. He had always loved Yvonne. Nelly apologized again and wished them well. Kasia also approached Maurice and apologized for how she had treated him in the past, mocking him, insulting him, and calling him names. She admitted that he had proven them all wrong. They all sat in silence for a moment, each of them reflecting on the pain, the pride, and the damage caused by jealousy and rivalry. But in the end, they chose to forgive.